Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, what we're going to do is look at the teams that are involved in the NHL Draft Lottery, which is happening later this evening. And let's talk about the teams that have a shot at the number one pick. Now, for those that don't know, with the draw, the way they've changed the odds is pretty much they do two draws for the number one pick, and then they do a second draw for the number two pick, and that's it. And so if your team's in a certain slot, the furthest they can drop down is two spots. And the lottery odds are weighted a little bit different. It's a little bit wonky because in a way they've made it is to kind of make sure that teams aren't fully tanking. So some teams might have a better shot at getting a certain pick more than the other. It's really weird. So even though the Vancouver Canucks were the worst team and have the best odds, they actually only have a 25% chance of winning the number one pick. So they still have a 75% chance of not getting the pick. So with that being said, there's 11 teams that have a shot at the number one pick. And so we're going to quickly run through those teams and talk about how that would impact that certain team and also what the outside world will perceive. Because here's the thing, if you cheer for that certain team that's in the lottery, of course you're going to be excited. If you're a fan of that team and Team X wins the lottery, of course you're going to be ecstatic. That's just normal. So we're going to discount those feelings that fans have. We're going to talk about overall the perception that the outside world's going to have and what the feeling might be. And again, just as a reminder for most of you, I do a lot of my videos raw. So there's no edits. There is no trying to get rid of dead space or editing what I'm saying. I might mumble, I might stumble sometimes here and there. I really don't care. It's basically just presenting to you raw, and some of my thoughts come to me as I'm talking. And so bear with me and enjoy the ride as you can. So first off, out of the teams that are in the lottery, there's 5 out of the 16 teams that have no shot at the number one pick. That is the Washington Capitals, the Detroit Red Wings, whose pick actually belongs to the St. Louis Blues because of the Justin Falk trade at the deadline, the Columbus Blue Jackets, as well as the New Jersey Devils and New York Islanders. Now, don't forget, last year, New York Islanders moved up from the 10th spot all the way to number 1 and selected Matthew Schaefer, who, when everybody thought, the draft was happening a year ago, he might play 9 games and get sent back down and play in the minors for a little bit. Instead, the guy ripped it and had one of the best rookie years as a defenseman in NHL history. And the other thing is, here's the other thing people forget, is some of these teams, they've been sucking for a while. And when they suck for a while, you sometimes have to rebuild and have a lot of high-end picks to make it work. So some of these teams, you're going to be tired of hearing their names because they're always in the lottery. But until they accumulate a bunch of assets, eventually you can't turn your team around with one piece. Unless, of course, you're a team that just had a very, very bad year and really doesn't even need to be in the lottery, but because of how bad your season was, you're in the lottery, and really, you will probably be a playoff contender next season. So we'll talk about all those teams in this video here. Now, the way it works is the teams have a certain amount of combinations. And here's the thing, last year, the NHL did this live, and it was fantastic because it lets you see how things are playing out live versus thinking that there's something going on behind the scenes. A lot of people have always had these conspiracy theories. I sometimes like conspiracy theories as much as the next guy, but what they did last year actually made for awesome TV viewing. So they did the draft live. You were able to see what teams were still alive for a certain pick, what combination they needed to win, and what teams were alive. And so that was kind of cool to see. So with that being said, we're going to run through it. Basically, the way it works is I think there's 1,000 combinations that are possible. So to give you an example, the New York Rangers have, 11.5% chance of winning the first pick and jumping up from third to first. So if that is their, opportunity, that means they have 115 combinations out of the 1,000 in the lottery. The Vancouver Canucks, they'll have 255 because they have a 25.5% chance of winning the lottery. And so it goes all the way down to the St. Louis Blues, who only have a 3% chance as the number 11 pick. So looking at some of these teams, the first team that comes to mind that if they win the lottery, obviously the thought is for the most part, unless something wonky happens, Gavin McKenna or Ivor Stenberg are going to get selected in the first overall pick. There are some good defensemen, and here's the thing: there is no generational player in this draft. We've been hearing that term thrown around a lot, and in some cases, the hype doesn't match up to the pick made. Like if you remember a few years ago, Connor Bedard, the hype that was surrounding that kid was unreal. And when he got taken and didn't live up to those lofty expectations, the kid still rebounded. He's still going to be a superstar in the league, but it clearly set the hype up overdrive. And then it was disappointing. And then when the San Jose Sharks took Macklin Celebrini, who arguably also turned into a generational talent, it was actually one of the best players in the NHL after a great sophomore season. No one was really hyping up Celebrini the same way that Bedard got the hype. Don't get me wrong, Celebrini was still the consensus number one pick, but the hype was a little bit different. And then last year, it was between Michael Misa and Matthew Schaefer. Now, here's the crazy thing: the San Jose Sharks, even with a generational player, they still sucked and actually were the favorite to win the lottery last year and dropped down to second. If you go back in hindsight, could you imagine if the Sharks actually won the lottery and had taken Matthew Schaefer? Can you imagine the Sharks with Schaefer and Celebrini on their back end for like the next 10, 15 years? It's pretty much what the Avs have in McKinnon and Makar, but 10 years, 10 years earlier, I guess. So keep that in mind with some of these picks. But, let's start it off with some of the teams that we're looking at. And number 11 is the St. Louis Blues. If they get the first pick, no one's going to be upset. The Blues are a team. They have 3 first-round picks. They're kind of in that middle spot where they won that championship back in 2019. That was, fabulous. They've been kind of stuck, and the last couple of years they've made little mini runs near the end of the year to kind of keep them out from, being at the bottom where they've kind of been in shouting distance of a playoff spot. Obviously, last year they went on that crazy 12-game winning streak and got into the playoffs, but for the longest time, it looked like they weren't going to make it. Now, the rumblings were really strong around the trade deadline that Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas were available in trade. So if that was the case, it would be St. Louis totally blowing up everything because Robert Thomas is only 26 years old. He's a bona fide number one center. So, of course, the Blues probably put that out there to see what the feelers are from other teams and get an idea. And obviously the package that they wanted in return was massive. And if the Blues keep them, I don't think there's anything wrong, especially with, him and even Kyrou. And even though Kyrou is a winger, he still brings value. He probably could be traded. I could see Thomas not going anywhere because number one centers are very hard to find. And yes, they got some, great young players in the pipelines. Dalibor Dvorsky might turn into a good center. We don't know if he'll be a number one. So basically, if you trade Robert Thomas, you're going to start trying to find the next Robert Thomas. And Robert Thomas isn't 29, 30, 31 years old. He's only 26. He's in his prime. So if the Blues win, obviously a young asset will help, energize their team. They already have Jimmy Snuggerud, Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg, the ex-Oilers. So they have a lot of talent, young talent, and then they have some veterans in place. They did trade away Braden Shen and Justin Falk at that deadline. So if the Blues win, it will just help speed up their rebuild a little bit or retool or whatever they're trying to do. Not to forget that Doug Armstrong will be passing on the reins to Alex Steen, who will be the new GM. And that was, just announced 2 years ago, I think, that Steen was going to take over. So we'll see. And, obviously getting the first pick, maybe they do decide to go super young and trade Thomas Kyrou. And that will all depend if they win the first pick. The Nashville Predators also have a shot at the number one pick. The Predators, were a team that probably should have rebuilt. They probably should have kept Askarov and traded Saros. Instead, they went all in. Barry Trotz went a little bit bonkers and spent all that money. And I love when people are looking for agency, they're the winners. I understand how they're winners by signing Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, and Jonathan Marchessault to these crazy contracts where they're not going to be worth it, and they already probably aren't worth it because of how expensive and old they are. So they made a little run, and at this point, they don't really have a lot of young guys in their system. Luke Evangelista had a good season last year. They do have one really high-end prospect in Brady Martin, so they can use a McKenna or a Stenberg for sure for their offense. I mean, eventually they need help on the back end. Roman Josi, there's only so much you can do. They have a lot of holes to fill. Saros has his 8-year contract, so if they want to move off of that, it's going to cost them something probably. Unless you're Edmonton Oilers and you just trade for him. But I think regardless, they need help anywhere and everywhere. So all it does is speed up things for them if they were able to land a McKenna or a Stenberg. Um, the next team that has a shot, shudder to think, is the San Jose Sharks. Getting Gavin McKenna or Ira Stenberg and lining them up next to Macklin Celebrini is already scary. Factor in that Michael Misa should be better. Will Smith was already, turning into a point per game player. Willie Macklin will be better. Sam Dickinson, and then they also have, Askarov and net. Like the Sharks were already sniffing the playoffs this season. They came, they're circling, pardon the pun, they were circling around the playoff spot near the end there until they kind of collapsed. They really need help on the defensive end. So yeah, they could use another high-end talent. Why couldn't you? But really, they probably more so than any other team need probably like a Keaton Verhoff or a Chase Reed or one of these kind of right shot Ds that they can, complement Dickinson and build their defense a little bit more instead of having older guys. So could they benefit from having a top end guy? Sure. They could also, highly unlikely, but they could also, if they won the lottery, trade down a few spots to get one of those D and get some, a boatload of assets, because definitely there'll be other teams that really want that number one pick. Now, the next team is one that people are going to lose their minds if they win the lottery. No, I'm not talking about the Leafs or the Rangers or Chicago. I'm talking about the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. Their pick was top 10 protected from the Seth Jones trade. They were crappy enough to finish in the bottom 10, and they have a shot at the number one pick. Can you imagine the outroar if the Panthers won the draft lottery, took, let's say, a McKenna, next year Barkov's back, they already have the rest of their cast in place. Really, the goaltending they would have to figure out. They might be able to bring back Bob for cheap and, get whatever else they need. They really don't need a player, really. Like, if it wasn't for Barkov being hurt and Tkachuk being hurt, like, they play a lot of hockey. They shut down a lot of guys. Florida's going to be back in playoff contention next year. I don't think they're falling off the map anytime soon. It was one outlier after 3 crazy long, years playing hockey. They have all their guys. They're going to bring them back. But if they landed one of these young wingers, my goodness, like they would be stacked. And if they really wanted to, they could use that piece as a trade chip to get even future assets if they really wanted to. I don't think they would. I mean, again, this is being a little bit out there because Barry Zito would probably not trade those guys. They'd probably just add, because you get another winger, an entry-level contract for a couple more years, keep your championship window open. But man, if the Panthers won, people would just lose their shit. It'd be insane seeing the Panthers win the lottery. The Winnipeg Jets sit at 7th worst. And here's the thing for Winnipeg. They're one of those teams that if they won the lottery, no one would be happy, in the sense that it's a boring team to win. And again, nothing against the city of Winnipeg or anything. But again, we know the Jets' reputation, right? Like the city has a reputation. It's the smallest market team in the whole NHL, the entire league. It's pretty much on everybody's no trade clause. Players don't like going there. This is the only way for them to build. So them winning the pick would be a great way to try to get back into the playoffs. Remember, they won the President's Trophy last year. They still have Connor Hellebuck. This year they were, stuck with a one line with Velarde, Scheifele, and Connor. Getting a McKenna would help them. Obviously, their biggest priority is a second line center, but then again, join the club. There's like a gazillion clubs that need a first and second line center. So they could definitely use that. But overall, for the league, it's just kind of a meh feeling if the Winnipeg Jets win. Now, a lot of people might feel like that for Winnipeg, but this next team is the one that I personally do not want to see win the lottery, because it would be the most boring thing ever. Unfortunately, no offense, Seattle fans, but the Kraken are boring as crap. Like they're dull, man. The way, and again, as a player, when Ron Francis played, I used to love Francis. Such a great player, patient playmaker, but it doesn't work in this type of management position. Like I knew the minute that Seattle hired him, like that Kraken were going to be a boring team. Unlike Vegas, which I get, had some advantages when they came into the league, the Kraken didn't have the same kind of leeway. Manager, GM smartened up not to make those kind of deals. But Francis, it just feels is so risk averse to doing anything big. Like it's just kind of whatever. And then every guy they've drafted, it's kind of been mad. They really haven't hit on anybody. You at this point, it looks like maybe Berkeley Catton might be a player, but it's still too early. Matty Beniers was second overall. You thought maybe he might turn into something. He kind of was, not there, but maybe he still has potential to bounce back. And then Shane Wright, of course, from that draft when Montreal did not take Shane Wright and he gave that death stare when he got selected. It obviously worked out, and same with the teams that are behind him because, Wright went fourth to Seattle. Logan Cooley went right before to Coyotes / Mammoth. Simone Nemec is a great young defenseman. Of course, a defenseman take longer to develop. And number one, of course, was Montreal Canadiens power forward, Yurov Slafkovsky, who I'm pretty sure 10 out of 10 times people are taking him over Shane Wright. No questions asked. So Seattle won the lottery. No one's going to care. It's going to be the most irrelevant lottery win ever. Unlike, even when the Islanders won, yes, Lou Lamoriello made him bored, but the Islanders are a proud franchise that have a lot of diehard fans. And it's a franchise that, when they're relevant, it's fine for the league because it's good. But, the Kraken, I don't know, man. I think the Kraken are going to be in trouble. They actually probably need to win the lottery to get some more excitement back in that market because if the Sonics are coming back soon, man, this thing with the Kraken, they had the one playoff round win that came out of nowhere, that playoff appearance. That might be all they have for a while because this team is so mediocre. The signings they made, like Chandler Stevenson, like they have like 4 really good third lines. You know what I mean? Like all their lines look the same. There's not one line. Yeah, Capo Caco and Matty Beniers and Shane Wright, McCann. Like yeah, they got a bunch of young guys, but yeah. I don't know. The next team, which of course would be interesting for TV and screen time and content, especially for the media, the next pick, 6th worst, belongs to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who, as you saw in my video the other day, had a ridiculous press conference the other day, made some outrageous decisions because, of course, that's what the Leafs do. This was part of the useless Brandon Carlo trade that they made with the Boston Bruins. Newsflash, Toronto management or ownership, whoever frickin' approves these trades, don't ever make a trade with a division rival, especially the Boston Bruins. Every time you make a trade with these guys, you get ripped off. It doesn't work for you. So why do it? Brandon Carlo was never worth a first, and on top of that, you also gave up Fraser Minton, who, ironically enough, is kind of a young guy that Toronto needed probably on the third line this season. He did really well in Boston for his rookie season. And now, here's the thing. If Toronto does not finish in the top 5, this pick, if they drop out of the top 5, this pick goes over to Boston, and Toronto has no first-round picks. Which would be kind of funny based on, the whole Chayka hiring yesterday and everything that happened there. So, do I want to see Toronto finish in the top 5? No, but if Toronto, the only place Toronto's going to be is either they're going to drop down or they're going to win number 1. And can you imagine what would happen if they won number 1 and took Gavin McKenna? It would just make for crazy TV viewing because then, do they decide, because now they're landing a young stud to build with, that you just blow up everything and you trade Matthews and Nylander and just go full scorched earth and start over? Or are they going to try to keep McKenna and be like, oh, we can try to win now and in the future now, yay, money, money, money. Either way, what I think is going to happen is Toronto's going to drop to 6th, and this pick's going to go to Boston, and Leafs fans are not going to be happy. And even if they keep this and they move up to, let's say, they stay in 5th maybe, then maybe they don't get picks for the next couple of years because Philly and Boston, those picks convert over, push back a year. I don't know, man. I don't know. The number 4 team, as of odds right now, also has a chance to drop back down. They have actually a better chance, of 44.6% chance of finishing in 5th place and a 20.8% chance finishing in 6th place, and that's the Calgary Flames, who are one of 2 teams to never in their history draft in the top 3. The other team doesn't even count. The other team's freaking Vegas. They don't count. They haven't been around that long. The Flames in their history have never picked in the top 3, which is mind-boggling, but also goes to show you how much of a mediocre team they've been. They've always been in the mushy middle, always, because their ownership group thinks that, oh, let's just get in because 2004 happened. Guys, that was over freaking 20 years ago. It was a fluke. That Flames team was not that talented. It was having one main guy, Jarome Iginla, and a stud goalie with Mika Kiprasov putting, his best performance in the playoffs and carrying that team of pluggers to the finals playing Daryl Sutter hockey. They are not a talented team. They weren't in comparison to what they have had even in the following years after that, when they've gone through Alex Tanguay and Olli Jokinen, and then they got Mike Camilleri, Jay Bouwmeester. All these moves, and their team did nothing after. Then they finally decided to rebuild, and they half-assed that rebuild because they stopped and shifted course halfway through because they made the playoffs one year and they're like, oh, I think we're ready now. No, you're not ready. So you drafted Monahan, you drafted Tkachuk, who was probably the best player in that draft. Personally, Tkachuk's had a better career than Austin Matthews. No one gives a crap about your Rocket Richard trophies there, Austin. Tkachuk's got 2 cups. He's also got the gold medal that you have too. And really, the only thing difference between you two is that you have a C and he doesn't. And in the end, I don't think it matters regardless. So I think the Flames, and also how they played down the stretch, they won some games they had no business. But for the first time in like their franchise history, instead of just tweaking and doing little minor trades at the deadline, they actually traded away guys with term because they never do that. The fan base has been clamoring for years for the Flames to do that because they're always freaking mediocre. Don't forget, last season the Flames had 96 points and missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker. Again, they have a lot of good pieces, and what they need is high-end talent. They have a franchise goalie in Dustin Wolf, and heck, Devin Cooley is one of the best backups in the league, so their goaltending tandem is one of the best. They got a hotshot, defenseman in Zane Parekh. They have other mid-round players, middle six guys that can play. They have guys that can, be decent players from the second, third, and fourth line. What they need desperately is a number one setter, which has been a problem since, Joe Nieuwendyk got traded for Jarome Iginla back in the 90s when he was just a prospect for the Dallas Stars. But either way, getting a guy like Gavin McKenna changes the trajectory of this franchise tremendously. It still doesn't get them where they need to be. They decided to finally commit to a rebuild, something they haven't done since the dreaded Young Guns era of the 90s. Maybe that's why the ownership group is so traumatized by what happened then. Let's go, Young Guns! Todd Simpson! Woo! Anyways, the Flames really need to pick, and chances are they drop back. And if they do, they'll probably pick a decent player to keep building. And Craig Conroy, the GM there, has done a fantastic job of accumulating assets. And so the Flames do have a bright future as long as they don't shift course. They have a lot of young talent in the pipelines. They're one of the better prospect groups in the league now. And they also have a lot of cap space, and they have a new building coming, which is going to be the best building in hockey when it comes open in 27-28. So good for them. The New York Rangers are in third, and the Rangers and Flames finished with the same amount of points, but the Flames had the tiebreaker, so Rangers finished below them. The Rangers picked in, I think it was a COVID year, was it 2020 or 2021? They got Alexis Lafreniere. When they came out, they played in the play-in tournament, they won the lottery, and everybody's like, what is going on? How did these guys win the lottery? Like, oh, is it rigged? That's when, things were like, oh, they probably rigged it to win. Listen, 2 words for you. Chris Drury. If you want 4 words, Chris Drury, James Dolan. Any prospect that gets drafted, yes, the Rangers have Shesterkin in net. They have Adam Fox on the back end. They have, Lafreniere, I guess. They have some other younger guys. Gabe Perreault played well. Will Cooley had a good season. They got Mika Zibanejad there. They have JT Miller, who's pretty useless there. If they draft a guy that, as we've seen before, they're just gonna ruin him anyways, man. So to me, the Rangers getting Stenberg and McKenna doesn't help anybody. Sure, it's great for the league in terms of the Rangers having a high-end player. They could sell some merchandise. That's great. But in terms of the development, they're probably gonna ruin the player, whoever they draft anyways. It's best that they take someone like, I don't know, a guy that they drop in the lottery from 3rd to 5th and take a defenseman that has to still go play and develop some more. And maybe by then Drury's gone and someone else comes in that's capable of turning that around. But yeah, the Rangers have a shot, so we'll see what happens. Number 2 is the Chicago Blackhawks. And honestly, I'm kind of sick of the Blackhawks because they have been in this spot for quite some time. They've made some picks, and they got Anton Frondel came aboard. Obviously, Connor Bedard was a big piece. They traded for Spencer Knight. Um, they drafted Levshinov for D, and so they also have Frank Nazar. Like, they have a bunch of talented players. Could they use a McKenna or Stenberg? Sure, they could. They could also use one of a Chase Reed would be great for their back end. Like, there's a lot of defensemen that they can use. So whatever piece Chicago gets is going to help. I think a lot of and here's my take on this. I'm still pissed about Chicago getting Bedard just because I felt like with the whole scandal that they had to deal with a couple years ago, to me, it's ridiculous that the Ottawa Senators lost the first round pick for, not revealing that no trade thing with Dadonov and the whole Vegas deal. But yet these guys didn't lose anything with everything that happened there. And it just, anyways, not much you can do there. They got Bedard, and they'll get somebody else decent in this draft. And then finally, the number 1 pick, and I think they're not even going to win the lottery. I think they're going to drop down to 3 because the Vancouver Canucks suck. That is a crappy organization too. There's a bunch of them in the league, right? Like, Toronto's totally garbage. We've covered that in the other video with the whole, latest hiring and all that. But the Vancouver Canucks also don't have a great franchise. They absolutely stunk this year. Like, they played like shit the whole season. And Patterson is I don't happen to him. People, can hate on Jonathan Huberdeau. Yes, he has an overpaid, he's overpaid and all that. But the guy's older, he's trying, he had the hip surgery, so whatever. But Patterson's been trash, and he's young. And, Vancouver should have got rid of Patterson and Miller at the same time. Anyways, they traded Quinn Hughes. That worked out great for both teams because the pieces they got back for the type of deal and the situation was fantastic. Marco Rossi, Zeev Buium, Liam Ogren, and a first, that's a fantastic package, so it does help them. And do I want to see a McKenna or Stenberg there? No, I could see a Stenberg there just because he's Swedish and end up playing with Pedersen. Or the other Pedersen or the other Pedersen. I don't know. Either way, I think Canucks winning would just suck, man. I mean, they're just gonna. I feel like they're gonna ruin it. Just like I'm talking about the Rangers. Like, it's a toxic environment, man. Like, Rutherford needs to retire. Aquilini needs to sell the team. The Canucks are screwed too. It's not like McKenna or Stenberg's gonna make them any good. This is crazy because 2 years ago they were in the second round. Almost had the Oilers on the ropes in the playoffs. They're pushing it to Game 7. So they've fallen, and they're not going to be good anytime soon. I don't care what they do in terms of making moves because Rutherford hasn't hired the GM. Rutherford's probably still going to call the shots because I don't see that guy backing off. I personally don't think Rutherford's a great GM. I don't care what he did in Pittsburgh or Carolina or whatever. Yeah, when you already have generational players on that team, I don't give you much kudos in terms of saying that you're a great GM when you inherited some pieces or you just have to do the easy thing and make them the top pick in the draft. So yeah, those are the rundowns of the teams that are in there. Now, for me, personally, I don't want to see Seattle win it. I don't want to see Winnipeg win it. I don't want to see Vancouver win it. Don't want to see Chicago. Don't want to see New York win it. Definitely don't want to see Toronto win it. In terms of what I would like to see, I'd be happy if Calgary won it. I actually would be happy if San Jose won it because it would just make them that much more crazier to watch. And I'd be fine if Nashville or St. Louis came out of nowhere to win because that'd be total fluke again, and that'd be kind of cool to see. I do think the Flames, out of all these teams, because they played ethically down the stretch, deserve the number 1 pick. I guess even Florida winning would be kind of interesting. There's definitely some teams I want to see for entertainment purposes. Let's see how the draft lottery goes. Talk to you guys later. I hope you guys enjoy the video.